that stuff basically became uncool. It became unhip. It was sort of like, wearing your granddad's undies. It was that sort of stuff. You're here in the Gunners Club. You're here with Gunner and music lover Suze.
Oh, yeah.
We're so glad you've joined us because...
I'll just sit here and hum.
Here's the thing. Punk music happened in the mid-70s in England and America, and the music world changed. So the sort of music which I grew up loving, the prog rock music, stuff like Yes, stuff like Pink Floyd, Genesis, that stuff basically became uncool. It became unhip. It was sort of like, wearing your granddad's undies. It was that sort of stuff.
So that brings us to the question, does it pass the pub test?
I mean, is that music still valid today? It's a really good question because, for me, I play bluegrass music. And the thing about bluegrass music is you have to be really, really good to do it. You have to be good because you're playing amongst other people who honour the music that they play. That's what bluegrass music is. And in amongst it, there's always a chance in a bluegrass song to play a solo for at least a minute by yourself. Unrehearsed. They just give you the nod and away you go.
I find that playing with yourself seems to give you a great deal of natural outcome.
Well, you've had a few releases, haven't you?
Well, this is it.
But prog rock's pretty much the same. So lengthy pieces, and a lot of it is unorchestrated. That means when they give you the nod and you're Rick Wakeman wearing the cape on keyboard, by George, you've got to be able to play for a few minutes. Punk happened. Suddenly, this noodling on your guitars for 20 minutes, that was uncool. And they chopped the songs down, to these small packets of a few minutes. I'll put it in context. The band we're talking about is called Marillion, and they are really the fathers of what we call neo-prog today. So new progressive rock. But you see, around this time, this is what was going on. Bands like Pink Floyd were doing their swan song with the final cut in 1983. The music became darker, more sombre. Keyboards were more popular around that time, and certainly they wanted to cut the length of the songs down. So into this era, a young band from England with a Scottish songwriter who called himself Fish came on the scene. And the band was called Marillion.
Does that sound fishy to you?
Yeah. Marillion's an interesting name. I mean, where does it come from? Well, they started off basically as fans of Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
And that posthumous book that came out, The Silmarillion, which talked about the creation of, Middle Earth. That's where they get their name from. But the music, it was that sort of stuff you'd expect a young, new band to do. I mean, they were adventurous and they were doing different things. There's a lot of pose and poetry in the writing of Fish, and I think that's something that'll attract a young person to this music. It's something different because it's not like a text that can be written by somebody who's cooking at the same time. This is something which is almost biographical and which really delves into the emotions of a young person. And a young person who's going through some form of distress. Because it was her first album, he was brave enough to try things like, I think, a not entirely successful falsetto. But by golly, he did it. And the emotion and the rawness and the newness that we get from this is really worth picking up. Script from Ingester's Tear. And a common theme through the album covers with Fish was that you'd have that harlequin or that jester. The songwriter only lasted with the band for the first 4 albums, and that's why I think it's so interesting to explore them. Yesterday I sat down and I listened to each album back to back, and at the end I wasn't fatigued. I actually reached for his first solo album and listened to that because I just couldn't get enough of it. It was that much fun. As the music became more developed, it became more confident and I think more strident. There's a lot of space though and a lot of atmosphere in this album, Fugazi. So I love the artwork. Can you see this bedroom? It's basically a dream of a young teenager back in 1984. He's on the bed, he's got the Walkman, the TV's on, he's got the stereo. It's great fun. But of course, he's got all the dramas of a young teenager. He's been introduced to alcohol, he's been introduced to love, all these sorts of things. And aptly, the title is called Fugazi, which is Look, it's a slang Italian-American word which means, can mean either it's fake, those diamonds ain't real, Fugazi, or it can mean that it's broken. In this case, I guess either the life that this guy's experiencing is fake, it's an artifice. And have a look how he's cocooning himself. It's a bit like the virtual reality world that we live in today. He's just sort of tuned out. Or it can be effectively that he's broken. I think where Marillion really hit their stride was on their third album, which was a #1 album in the UK, and it really made waves around the world, particularly in Europe, Misplaced Childhood.
I have to admit, I have never, ever heard of this band.
Okay, and there's a Harlequin making a dash. Now, the Harlequin's interesting because it's effectively like going back to Greek theatre where we wear masks, we can be different people, and that's effectively what the Harlequin is. I guess here, Misplaced Childhood, we've got a person who's going through several different forms of love. One of them is obviously a dalliance with a prostitute. The other one is true love that he meets, and he begged and begged and said, I just wanted you to be the first one. There's a great song in here which was a very big hit worldwide. It's called Kayleigh, a name that didn't exist until the album. But a fun story, Fish, the songwriter, went to a pub many decades later, and a young girl behind the counter was serving his beer, and she had a name tag on, Kayleigh, and he just looked at her and said, your parents were Marillion fans, weren't they? She said, yeah, my dad was. He said, put him on the phone, it's Fish speaking. He invented the girl's name.
Wow.
That's kind of cool. If you're going to get into Marillion, music from this period, the neo-prog, this is the album to pick up. The artwork is fantastic. If you can get it on vinyl, please do. Your listening experience is going to be so much better because you've got the lyrics as well to read, and just the tactility of this. It's a piece of art, and he kept the same artist for the first 4 albums, and even for his first solo album as well. Also on record, there's no gap between the songs. So one song winds onto the next, until side A is finished, and then you wind over to side B. It makes the listening experience a lot more pleasurable as well. A number of great hits. There are moments here where there's almost elation in the music. It's a lot more confident than the first 2 albums. Really comes into its own, and it's the sweetest ear candy I think that he's done. The 4th and last album that they did together is called Clutching at Straws. Now, the problem is that the art cover wasn't given the time that it needed. And see what I mean? It's not the great art cover. What he was trying to show was legends who had suffered through their addictions to, let's say, alcohol or chemicals, and had created great art. And he considered himself, I guess, amongst that as well. The back cover was supposed to be that same bar, but empty. But I've got the German version here. And the Germans do their own thing. The one good thing about having the German version is that you get an embossed record cover, and also it's a direct metal master, which means it's a lot more pristine to listen to the ears, slightly less analog perhaps, but it's a bit of a joy to listen to. This album is heralded by some as the best album that they did. It's certainly confident, and not only is it stridently confident like the third album, but I would say you really get the Celtic underpinnings, almost the lilt of his Scottish brogue, of his accent when it comes into the music. It's more melodic. And I think that's what makes it really, really listenable. And that transitions into the next album that he did shortly after he had the falling out with EMI. So Marillion went their own way without him, and it was that war. What's going to happen? We've got now Fish as a solo artist against the old Marillion with Steve Hogarth. Who's going to win in the charts when they're released? Well, actually, Fish had the more successful album. I think it got to number 5, and Marillion's, I think, hit number 7 on the charts. But if you want to know the direction that Marillion was taking, simply going to Vigil in the Hall of Mirrors, I believe it's called, that Fish did, or otherwise go down the path that Steve Hogarth has done very well. It wasn't for about another 10 years after Fish had left Marillion that they really started to do what people would consider as prog rock again. And they had quite some success when they did Fear of Sunlight, some 10 years after that happened. Why I think this music is still relevant today? It's poetic. It deals with human themes. When you listen to this music today, if you go from the first to the fourth, you start to see something which comes from raw emotion and exploring, not afraid to make mistakes, to something which becomes atmospheric and then stridently confident. And you add to that strident confidence the Celtic lilt. And I think you've got what I would call, especially in that third album, Misplaced Childhood, I would say a minor masterpiece. And certainly the band that made Marillion, the fathers, and I think the most successful of the neo-prog bands. Prog music today, it's sort of diverted a lot from there. It's become basically an amalgam of metal and prog. So metal prog is mostly what you hear today. The problems that I have with that is I think it's taken away from some of the music mastery. It's taken away some of the empty spaces. And remember, music is all about timing. It's about the silences as much as it is filling those voids. Although, if you are looking for a fun metal prog band to get into, Coheed and Cambria, you'll thank me later. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, join us for more. We'll catch you soon.
Catch you on the next one.